Welcome, City Church family, to another podcast where we're celebrating 15 years of City Church. And we're here today with Pastor Jim and Carmen, and also the founding pastors of City Church. And they're going to tell us a little bit about the story if you don't know it. In fact, I don't even know the full story of City Church. So I just want to ask, how did people from Alabama end up in Savannah planning a church?
That's a good question.
Well,
All right.
so we were on staff in Alabama. This was
Well, you're
post.
from Alabama, right?
Yeah, well, we'd gone to Bible college at Central Bible College, Assemblies of God in Missouri. Moved to Alabama, back to our home church to come on staff as I was the janitor, the lawn maintenance, landscaping guy, and the youth pastor. So
We filled the vending machines.
yeah,
Classic combo.
they had a private school, and every day after school I would go and clean into the night and clean all the rooms, vacuum, take out the trash, clean the toilets.
We would do that in the afternoon and then go do youth group stuff at night.
Yeah. It depended on the day. Like if there were athletics going on, I had to wait until they were done, so it'd be late at night.
Yeah.
She would go help sometimes not. We had Isaac at the time, so our oldest. So a lot of times it was me. But we did that, and they had a baseball field and a soccer field, so we mowed the grass, and and we were youth pastors, and we had done that for a couple of years, and I had a buddy of mine from college who his dad was looking for a youth pastor at the time and really wanted me to apply, and I was like, I'm not unhappy-ish, I mean, there were things I didn't like about what we were doing, but we decided, he kept pestering me, so I put together a resume, gave it to him. I don't even think I got it to him in time. They ended up hiring somebody, and then another guy in Florida was looking for a youth pastor, and happened to get the stack of resumes that were left over from that application. Mine was in it, and didn't even call me about that. But we got a call that they were starting a program going into the public schools to talk about sex education, and we had done that in Bible college. So we worked.
You did sex education in Bible college?
Yeah, we went to public
public
schools
schools.
and taught sex ed
Oh,
to kids.
That's
So
cool.
yeah, so we would talk about the importance of saving yourself and the kind of the lies of safe sex.
Okay.
And it was I mean, we could go into it, but it'd probably make my kids uncomfortable.
I
if they
really
were
can't
watching.
imagine you doing this.
Yeah.
We worked in Missouri. It was an after-school program. So it was go into this after-school program,
In the public schools, not private schools
Yeah,
or
in the
Christian
public
schools.
schools.
It was public schools.
fifth
So,
grade through 8th grade.
Yeah.
And
Right.
then because that was on our resume, this group in Florida that was hiring,
Started a ministry doing that.
they were going into the public school system, taking over their health class or science class for 6 weeks at a time, 1 day a week.
Yeah.
And they wanted a husband-wife teaching team.
To come and help, so.
we were the ones that they called, and
Yeah, so we were there,
we did
and
that in Florida for a while.
Caitlin came on the scene, and there were definitely good things there, but there was I have a good, I hopefully restored relationship with my with some of the leaders from there, but at the time they were very much it was very much an alpha male. I don't know, that's not the right term. Just very in charge, right? And trying to think of the kind language, and that's just a personality type. People who are just very domineering that I struggle with, because I'm very much like, let's have a conversation, let's talk, let's work things through. And it was constant conflict for me, and it was the type of conflict where I would come home and just be like, I'm unhappy. So really what we did was my that same buddy, his dad was looking for another youth pastor because that guy had not worked out, and this had been like 2 years, I think.
Yeah, I mean, from my perspective, this is how it went. Is we moved to Florida to that job, not knowing I was pregnant.
Yeah.
I found out at the beginning of that job I was pregnant.
Right.
Worked the whole year, so we would go into the classrooms with T-shirts for our company that said "I choose to wait," and I'm like 8 months pregnant, walking in there, and it was fun to see the students react like, "What does that mean?" You know, I'm like, "Well, I'm 8 months pregnant, and I chose
I'm
to
married."
wait." You know, and
Yeah.
I'm married. So anyway, it was kind of a risk avoidant program. It covered like, what are your life goals? What are the things that deter you from reaching your life goals? Drugs, alcohol, just being promiscuous. You know,
Right.
Sex before marriage, all this stuff. So anyway, so part of our pay package was that Isaac had his daycare covered as part of our pay package, and then so would the new baby, Caitlin. And then I think it was the month she was born, or within that time, they phased out newborns to 1 year. So that was no longer part of our pay package. And we sat down and calculated, like, if I were to work part-time and we were to pay childcare part-time, I'm bringing in no money, basically, you know. So it kind of became a point in our lives where we were like, okay, well, we're just going to do this. Like, I'm just going to stay home with the kids, and you're going to work, and that's going to be how our home operates. Now, when I say I was going to stay home with the kids, I wanted to be a part of life and ministry alongside Jim.
Right.
So that translated into, okay, we decided we would homeschool for our own family schedule and for all these things. So, but at the point that we decided we needed to go to just his income, we needed to change jobs. So that's kind of my perspective of it. I wasn't in the day-to-day conflict in his head that he was in, you know, and
Right.
and in that growing and maturing time, I was just having babies and and doing the mom thing.
I will certainly say that there was a real lack of immaturity in retrospect. You know,
Right.
It's funny because I watch people today make decisions on the way that they're going to lead their family, the way they're going to move forward, and I think, man, I made the same decisions, and I made them for a lot of the same reasons, and I have repented, and it's tough because most people don't really want to hear from you. You know, you try to say, hey, maybe this isn't the best thing, or maybe we can slow down, and I get it, because in that moment of my own immaturity, I thought I had it all figured out. So anybody from the outside was just, they're not as in tune with God as I am, and
Right.
I was wrong.
So Caitlin is now 19, almost 20, and she's about to be married. So
Yeah.
on this side of it all, I can look back and go, we only knew what we knew, and you make decisions based
Right.
on like these factors in your life, and you just feel like, oh, I'm making such the right, like, mature decision. And sure, probably, but there are, looking back, I'm like, okay, I see how we could have done it differently and better and all that. But anyway, so we ended up as a result in South Georgia in the Church of God.
Yeah, and
As youth pastors.
Yeah, as youth pastors, and there, that was a good experience. I had a good relationship with the pastor, good guy. Also, another kind of like, a lot of times my way or the highway.
Right.
And I always walked out the door, whatever they said, I did. I didn't go out. I mean, I'd go home and complain to her.
Right.
But I was always, and I'll just back up, even to Bible college. Like, I kind of like whatever I agreed to. So like
Right.
in Bible college, like we had to sign a form saying we would not go to the movies, dance, or drink. And while I was in Bible college, we didn't,
Right.
when we went to go see the Fellowship of the Ring, we were in Bible college, we had to wait for Christmas break. And
So
we weren't technically in
Bible
school.
college, that's
And
awesome.
so we went, and I bet you I drug her to, 20 movies.
I would
and,
be at every movie possible.
Yeah. Now I will say, like, even my professors would talk about how they just didn't. They did whatever they wanted. I
Right.
mean, most people just didn't care.
Right.
But I always had this like kind of like no, I said it. I just better do it. Now,
Mm-hmm.
it really does matter to me that way. So
So we were in Hazelhurst, Georgia. I
Yeah.
don't know if you're familiar with Hazelhurst. It's a small town.
Yes.
Yeah.
And we went by way of Hazelhurst and Baxley before we came to Savannah. And while we were in Hazelhurst, our pastor that we worked under was very good to us.
Yeah.
In that when Zoe, our third child, was born, and we were immediately in an emergency situation, we were rushed here to Savannah.
Yep.
Lived at the Ronald McDonald House for 2 months. Of course, at that time we didn't know how long it would be.
Right.
So week to
And
week, he said, "You stay there with your family. You're still going to get a paycheck."
Yep.
And just amazing.
the whole
support.
church, the whole
Yeah.
church was supportive.
That's awesome.
So we had a really pretty positive there. Again, at times it was very much like
Right.
a personality difference, and I accept that is what I'm getting at.
Yeah.
Like I'm not trying to say like, oh, that's wrong, but it did define some of who I am, which I'll get to in a minute. But there's a really important part I don't want to skip in here.
Sure.
This is why I'm trying to pause in this. Is that this was like the kind of the beginning of video streaming,
Right.
and there were a handful of churches using a video service called Vimeo. Is that right? And they were basically uploading their videos, and they were like some type of like torrent or something. I forget.
Right.
Like you couldn't really stream it, but what would happen is they would upload it, you would download it, and then you could watch it.
Right.
And I was introduced to a guy named Mark Driscoll, and I know that there's a lot of controversy around Mark Driscoll. Some people love him, some people hate him. I really don't care, because the truth, as I stand before the Lord one day, is that his videos led me to read his books, and he was a church planter,
Right.
and he just he wrote a book called Reformation Rev. In which he talked a lot about church planting, and that had never even occurred to me, that going and starting a church, even that terminology, church planting,
Right.
was totally foreign. So it was during that time that I began to think, okay, I'm unhappy with some of what I see behind
Right.
the scenes. And this is tough for people, because I don't think a lot of it has changed. And, I tell people the dirtiest joke that I've ever heard in my life, the filthiest joke that I've ever heard in my life, came from a pastor.
Right.
I won't repeat some things, but I mean, there are things that I have heard pastors say behind closed doors that, I would doubt Netflix would air. And I'm not being facetious.
Right.
I'm being legitimately like, there are some trashy things that
So
some
what
guys
do you
have
say
said.
is the problem with that? Is the problem the lack of integrity, or is the problem that they're talking out both sides of their mouth? Like, when you say that's a problem, what is the problem with that for you?
Well, I mean, I believe that Paul addresses, coarse talking, it's sin. And
Right.
so there's a double standard. And then those same guys will get up. And I'm not saying that these are guys that I served under. One of them
Right.
is, and that one that told the dirtiest joke I served under for a short time. But, I mean, just going and being involved in camps and being around other pastors, the level of behind-the-scenes hypocrisy, and then to get up on Sunday and preach the message of honoring the pastor, and and again, you pair that with that personality of like, I'm in charge,
Right.
and it's like, bro, like I know the things you're saying when none of the congregants are here,
Right.
and yet you talk about spiritual authority, and I really have a problem with it. It shaped me, and to the place where I wanted to plant a church, and ultimately, I was reflecting on the fact that we were going to talk about this. Like, I had these conversations around, like, Camelot, like King Arthur and the Knights of the Round Table, and I had this idea that that there would be equality at the table among the leaders in the church.
Right.
And I knew there had to be a head. I knew that was biblical. I used the language from the very get-go. I was very comfortable with the fact that I don't have to be the head forever. I hope to have a seat at the table, but I hope that we can build something that is a reflection of what God wants, that has leaders that will do their part and support each other. And that was kind of brewing inside of us, but we didn't know where we would go.
Right. That's funny that you say that, because I've always said similar things of, like, not around Camelot, because that's your personality, but around the concept of like why, there's this hierarchy in ministry that seems to form, whether on purpose or not, and like to take that away and say that we're doing this together, and like you said, there needs to be a head clearly in the Bible, but like having people around the table at the same level and feel like they're in it the same way is something that isn't done. And I've been told flatly, you can't do it that way. Where are you going to find people to do it that way?
I'm going to tell you, 15 years in, it's not easy. We'll talk more about that in a minute, but yeah.
But that's cool. Now, were you having that thought about planting before you had came over with Zoe?
Oh, this is before Zoe was born. Like we were like,
Okay.
I was like, bro, New Zealand needs a church. Like we were looking everywhere.
You're gonna go to the Hobbit field.
Yeah,
I mean, this memory
the
of
Shire.
right.
I have this memory of being in this totally unrelated situation to him making this comment, but we must have been like in the middle of an event or something, and he just goes, one day we're going to plant a church. It's going to be in a coastal town. And it had nothing to do with what we were doing in the moment. I think we were doing like some big youth group shebang, or something. And I was like, what? That was random,
Yeah, just so random.
And I just kind of like tucked that away. And then like years later, probably 2 or 3 years later, I was pregnant with Zoe. And I was probably about 6 months pregnant at the time. And it just hit me like in my heart, like, okay, we're going to plant a church and have to live like missionaries. Like there's zero money in planting a church. And so we're going to have to just make this happen. So I began to like go through our house and clean out and be like, we need to get rid of stuff. We need to sell stuff. We need to downsize. We'll probably live like in a 1-bedroom apartment. I'm thinking like missionary mindset, like, really
right.
on living on nothing, basically. And so I was about 6 months pregnant with Zoe when that really started my heart while we were still on staff at a church. And he had been very open, to my knowledge, with the pastor about, hey, our heart is we want to go plant a church. And basically, from what I understand, the pastor that we were serving under was like, just keep me posted. Let us help you if we can.
That was in Hazelhurst. We were very open about it,
which is kind of countercultural to if like in churches at that time, especially in smaller churches, like they would just walk you out and fire you.
Right.
They still do that today.
Yeah.
I mean, we hear stories all the time of people sharing their heart and pastors having them taken out of off the church property.
It was nice to have the freedom to talk about it and to dream,
that's good.
and then to be open about it and to be like honoring to him. So then when you fast forward that I went into labor early with Zoe and all the complications that were there, we just ended up in Savannah at the Ronald McDonald House.
Did you guys know going into giving birth that there were complications?
No.
Or after?
Carmen had given birth to 2 healthy babies,
Right.
so as
Both
far as
of
we're
his older
concerned.
siblings were a week late. So I was adamant I would not go into the hospital till my water broke, and my water had not broke. But
Because there had been so many false labors before, just being nervous, not knowing what's going on.
Right.
So when I went in because my water broke, my doctor was mortified when she did the ultrasound and wouldn't say anything. She's like, we're getting this baby right now. And that's all I knew. I woke up and it was like go time, like your baby's not going to live, blah, blah, blah. And I just couldn't get my head around it. So that's a whole another story.
Right.
But
Well,
that's
part of it. So we ended up, and that was in Vidalia, and they came out and they told us that Zoe had been born, but that they could not care for him. I'm not going to go into his whole story because that's not the point of this. But they said that they had to get him to Savannah, and I said,
like an hour and a half drive. Right?
Yeah, and
For
I
those
said,
who don't know, Vidalia is like an hour and a half outside of Savannah.
and I said, they said the helicopter was coming, is what they said. That's how bad it was. And I said, okay, is Carmen riding with him, or what do we do? And they said, well, she can't go. She's not able to. She's got her own problems. She has to stay here. And so I went in the room. She was very groggy. And I asked her what she wanted me to do. She wanted me to go with him. Well, the helicopter was tied up at another accident and was not able to get there. And so by the time the helicopter could get there, the ambulance could have gotten him there. So they put him in an ambulance, and I followed with my flashers all the way to Savannah. And we got here, and it was at Memorial, and Memorial was great. I will say that we were treated very kindly. there was a sense of I don't know if negativity is the word right out of the
Right.
gate. Like they were not optimistic,
Right.
and they were pretty open. The doctors on the highest level were pretty open about that. The nurses would be very kind, and there were a lot of kind of scary moments, and then ultimately the one of the doctors, we would come in. For days I was there by myself, and then
Right.
finally we were able to get Carmen there. But we would go in, and we had this book. I went to the Christian bookstore. I think it was Lifeway or Family Christian, and I picked up this book I found called "God Made You Special," I think, or Max Lucado,
Right.
and about these little puppets. And I would go like Pinocchio type thing,
Right.
And so I'd go in there and I'd read that to him. So it's different today, but at the time, 17 years ago, you could go in, like you had visiting hours
Right,
basically, and you could
right.
be in there for 15 minutes, if I remember correctly.
Our visiting time was 5 minutes every 2 hours.
5 minutes every 2 hours. Okay, so it was pretty slim. So I'd go in, I'd read, I'd sing a worship song, I'd pray with them, I'd do something along those lines and cry.
awesome.
And
Right.
we both did this all the time, and we had some just like miracles happening along the way, just in our own lives, just God showing up. And it's this doctor said that he wanted to talk with us one day, and this is really the whole catalyst for the church.
Right.
And he said he brought us into a side room, which was not uncommon. I mean, we were being pulled to the side to be, get a conference,
Right.
and they would bring in nursing students to watch our reaction,
Right.
doctoral students. And but he came in and he said that he felt the need to tell us that we weren't being reasonable, and that he was a Christian, and that he had been a Christian his whole life, and that he attended church. He named the church he attended, and really tried to prop up his faith for us, and said,
Right.
you need to know that God does not do the things you're asking him to do. Your son will not be healed, and your son will die.
Wow.
And you've got to come to grips with that. And so I just want to back up and say one more thing,
Yeah.
because these are things that have been on my heart
Yeah, yeah.
lately.
You're good.
Is like when people walk around saying, "Oh, God told me this. Oh, God showed me this," I'm very hesitant to believe them. I think that when God speaks to us, some of what He says is part of a testimony, part of what we share, like what I'll share in just a moment. But oftentimes, it's God doing a work in my life. And I think that if I have to walk around telling everyone, God said this, God said that, I lose credibility in my faith.
Yeah.
People should be able to look at my life and the fruit of my life. And oftentimes I find that, that I don't feel the need to sit here and tell everybody, God said this, God said that.
I think it takes maturity too to understand the difference between the voice in your head and the voice of God.
Yes.
And I think younger Christians and mature Christians or new to the faith or whatever struggle with discerning the difference. And so sometimes that's where it gets lost.
And because the church world is filled with people who thus saith the Lord all the time, that creates an undue burden on me.
Right.
That people are going, well, the guy down the street does this, or I go to this church and they act like that, and all I can say is like, hey, spend some time around me and believe that God's at work or not. But I'm not here to debate,
Right,
But
right.
what happened in that moment was that I heard the voice of God speak, and in the midst of like this guy telling us that God was not going to heal our son, I heard God say, I want you to plant a church, and I want it to be in Savannah, Georgia. And I was like, this is an odd moment for this.
Yeah, what you're praying and seeking God and
for
asking
years.
for him to heal the baby.
For years, we've been asking for direction on where to plant.
Right.
We're
And
up
then in the
air. And
midst
now we're
of-
asking God.
Thrown into the situation.
Now this is after he told you to stop
This was in the meeting.
Oh, okay.
This was
So-
while he's saying it. God said this to me, and that's not even the craziest part. The craziest part is that we got up in that meeting, and I'm thinking, this guy's sitting here telling me to stop praying, and God is literally speaking.
Just dropped a bomb in you.
Yeah, he's saying God's not hearing what you're saying because God doesn't hear this, and God is saying, I want you to come to Savannah.
Right.
So we got up, we walked out, and the first thing I say to Carmen is not, can you believe he said that, or where's
Right.
that man's faith? It was, I just heard God say something to me, and she said,
We're supposed to plant a church in Savannah. Now, remember, this was about exactly between 7 and 10 days of Zoe having been born.
Mm-hmm.
So I was recovering from C-section. So I'm being wheeled over to the hospital, like feeling like I'm barely surviving, recovering from a major surgery, in postpartum, trying to keep up with all the news from the doctors, trying to just make sense of what is happening because he was so incredibly sick. So our minds were not on, wonder what the next step of life is. Our mind was on, in 2 hours when we come back, is our baby going to have died? Or what's
alive,
his
yeah.
condition going to be?
Right.
Yeah.
And because it was touch and go for, if you imagine.
even after that,
Yeah.
we went home with it being touch and go.
Yeah.
So.
Right.
So every 5 minutes, every 2 hours, like besides if we slept through the night at all, like your time is all upside down.
Right.
It's like crazy.
Yeah.
So that was not what was on our minds. Is I wonder when and where we'll plant a church. It was like, is our baby gonna live, and how do we even
Right.
like, get? Because we also had Isaac, who was 6 at the time, and Caitlin, who was 2,
And-
with us at the Ronald McDonald
Yeah.
house. So anyway, so it was a time where audibly we each heard, but individually, the
Yeah.
voice of the Lord say, you're going to come to Savannah, you're going to plant a church. But we didn't know each other had experienced it. And we've
Right.
never had another situation
Nope.
like that.
Was
since.
yours
Yeah.
during the same?
Yeah, same
period
meeting. I
when
sitting
he
side
was-
by side with
okay.
him.
Yeah, we were sitting side
we
by
walked out
side.
of that meeting and we were like, because we would walk out of meetings, so like he would go to a meeting and then I would, and then we'd
Right.
come back together and like talk about like, what do we need to know about this? What's the next decision we make for the baby? Blah blah blah.
Right.
It's like, to give you context, like we had to choose: are we signing a do not resuscitate order, or are we not signing it? So those were like the types of conversations we're having. Like,
Right.
here's the news we have. Like, what do you think? Should we sign this? Should we not? So we would always like touch base after a meeting, and so that's what was so odd about this was he goes, "You're not going to believe this because that's not what was on our mind."
Right. Right.
And I was like, "I know we're supposed to plant a church in Savannah," and we both heard, but not out loud.
Right. Right. Right.
But yeah, audibly. I mean,
Right.
if
That's
you know,
so-
you know, like,
Yeah.
so to walk around and say, God told me this, God told me that, like, we don't make that practice, but this was such a distinct thing that we knew we were going to come to Savannah, we were going to plant church, not anytime soon, because we had to figure out what was going on
Right.
with the baby, which
Right.
we did end up planning a funeral for him and our family coming in town and taking him off life support. And he's now 17 and a half years old. So that's a whole different
Yeah.
story.
Wow.
But anyway, so
So how did that feel? Like, did you both feel, because you both heard it, did you feel like it wasn't weird because you both felt it? Or like, man, we're in the middle of a life and death fight and you're throwing us this right now?
No, no.
it was
No.
just something that we were very sure about.
Yeah.
Like, okay,
We-
we'll get to that. You know, okay, we'll
Our-
do that.
Our hearts were very much around the fact that God was sovereign at the time. I mean, there's a sermon that John Piper had preached on, like, the difference in the gospel being, one guy says, ask Jesus into your heart. I think he says, like, you'll get a goat and a, whatever.
Right.
It's like the way that we go over to third world nations, and when you accept Jesus, you'll,
prosperity,
yeah. And he's like, that's not the gospel. The gospel is, crashing your car and holding your dying daughter in your arms and saying, God, I trust you. You're
Right.
sovereign through it all.
Right.
And that was very much a very stirring and moving sermon in my life leading up to this. And so we were very much, God, you tell us we can come and ask for healing. And so we do that as your children. We know you're sovereign. However, if the thing that brings the most glory to your name, if the thing that will lead the most to you is for our child not to live.
Right.
We have to trust that you know what
Yeah.
you're doing. And that was a hard prayer. Like we when usually, when we talk about it, like we would pray that prayer with, crying.
Right.
It was not like a prayer that was like, okay, let me, recite this this little thing. It was something that was kind of through gritted teeth, but we knew God was doing something. We just didn't know what. So him speaking did not, like I think, like she said, like it was like, okay, that's a God thing, but
really
we're going to
clear.
set that over
Set
here
that
for
over
a
here.
minute,
Right.
and we're going to keep focusing
Right.
and praying in this area. And to be honest, I mean, it was 2.5 years later before we planted the church,
Okay.
so it was
Yeah.
not
Okay. That was a
an
while,
immediate thing. So
Well, and then it was also important that we didn't go in and rebuke the doctors and tell them they were wrong.
Right.
Because we didn't go to medical school. Like, they obviously knew what they were talking about. And
Right.
what they were talking about was real, but there was just no solution to
Right.
Zoe's healing apart from supernatural intervention.
Right.
And so we were not rebuking them. We were not, like, yelling at them.
no, we both had the conversation that we understand even now that God calls some to be pastors, but he calls people to be doctors and lawyers. And those
sure.
that reject God and reject the gospel, he positions them into places that bring glory to his name. And so, I mean, we read that in Ecclesiastes. And so the idea that these people were not where God wanted them to be was, something that we never thought was a reality. So we knew God had the right people in the room at the right time, and God was sovereign.
So the clarity that came from that moment in the meeting with the doctor was that we would preach as truly as we knew how to the word of God for what it says. And that, to me, that was because he said he's been a Christian and grown up here and named the church that he went to.
Right.
And it didn't seem like he was reflecting knowledge of the word of God. Now, that being said, like, I don't know, maybe that's because he didn't personally take it to feed on the word of God. I don't know. I'm not blaming like the
Right,
church or
right.
whatever, but what the point is that it brought clarity that this is what we
Yeah,
will do
yeah.
is we will preach the word of God. So Jim decided to preach like expositionally, like we're gonna, is that the right word? Expository?
Yeah, line by line.
Line by line.
There
Right.
you go. I'm not the one doing it, but I just need the right definition there. But line by line, so that you don't skip the hard stuff. you
Was
know?
that how you preached before, or was that
Yeah,
something that changed? Okay.
No. I mean, when like right now, we're doing Ruth again.
Right.
I did line by line right out of the gate.
I mean, before you planted the church.
No, I mean, I wasn't pastoring before. So
Just
as a
youth
youth
group and stuff,
pastor,
right. It's a different thing.
It's a different,
Right.
it's a different thing. It was definitely more topical.
So you planted a church without much preaching, like
Certainly.
experience.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
And
Absolutely.
then we
yeah.
knew too, like we wanted engaging worship, but neither of us have any music background, so
Right.
we're gonna have to get the right people in place for that. So, but the word of God and engaging worship, those were like the two pillars
Right.
that were like we definitely want this. So, if it's okay with you, I'll fast forward to us coming to Savannah.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
I don't.
All right.
So
let's-
you went 2 years. You were back in Hazelhurst.
Hazelhurst, and then,
And then
we were in
Baxley.
Baxley. We were asked to take a moment to be at a church in Baxley by the denomination we were a part of to help them. And not much to say there. We just ended
It was
up
a short
leaving
time
there
that we
and
came here.
ended up
we
moving
went
here.
there with them knowing that we were ultimately
Yeah,
going to.
it was always up front
Yeah.
that.
So
that
when you
we were
came
doing
back
this.
with Zoe, it was like goal set. We're going to Savannah.
Yeah, I mean,
Eventually.
so basically, the pastor of the church ended up leaving, and a new guy was coming in, and it was just all like they wanted us to move to Baxley, and
Right,
it was
right.
all like we had already started this process. We were in pursuit of trying to get to Savannah, and
The way I remember it was like, as a favor, could you go by this
Yeah.
church and be there for a little while,
Right, right.
type thing.
Yeah.
That's kind of how I remember it.
and we had because of that influence from Mark Driscoll, we had applied with Acts 29 to be a part of that network, and we were actually about to fly out to Seattle, like wrapping all of that up at one point, and then they made some major changes, and they wanted a statement of faith that basically, that initially they were open-handed on
Right.
doctrines of eternal security and predestination, and they wanted to close that gap
Right.
in a way that we just could not, in fair conscience, hold to. And they said the same thing that we've heard over and over the years from organizations, and that is, well, just sign it. No one actually checks to see if you're
Right.
doing it. And I just couldn't do it.
But it kind of goes back to your core with college
Yeah,
and everything.
Yeah. So I said I couldn't do that. And we ended up kind of getting fast-tracked through ARC, the Association of Related Churches, which did not have any, anything we had to sign that said we were going to,
Right.
So
be held to some doctrinal standard in regards to some of those things that we would definitely say are open-handed.
Right.
So we moved to Savannah. I'm trying to remember all this in the way that it happened. So we moved to Savannah, but we didn't have any building or anything for the church. No real startup team for the church, but we were going to get ourselves established here. So we bought a house in a neighborhood that we could not have afforded, but it was because it was the worst house
Right.
in the
falling
neighborhood.
apart.
And we bought it on, the bank had repossessed it. And so anyway, so we bought it, we're fixing it up. And then we, through that house, we had a buddy who was a roofer that came down, and we were like, can you help us with the roof? And he found out about the church. He's like, I want to help you with the church. So then he became part of the church planting team. And then, so kind of like these people that were peripheral around us, they saw
Right.
we were crazy people about this house. People in our lives would be like, I would never live there.
So
But-
one day we came in after we had started fixing it up and we were living in it, and our bedroom was upstairs, and we came in and we were exhausted, and I kind of did the whole just fall on the bed thing,
Right.
Over exaggerated in front of Carmen, and the biggest rat I've ever seen in my life came out from under it
was
and
nasty.
ran to the stairs, and it was so
Wobbled
fat.
down.
I could have picked it up if I knew what to do. It just was wobbling, rolling down the stairs, and then ran out a little hole in the wall in the back. So the
I
whole
was
back
so
half of the building
excited
was.
to live in this house on this property, because if you know anything about Savannah, it's Ardsley Park. It was a really nice neighborhood.
Yeah.
It just was a really bad
Right.
house.
Right.
And so one night I got up to go to the bathroom in the middle of the night. We were living in it while we were fixing it up.
Yeah.
So it looked like nobody lived there. It was very dilapidated. And I called the cops because there was something sketchy going on the sidewalk. When I looked out the bathroom window, it looked like a deal was going on or something. And I called the cops. I was like, something's going on in front of my house. I'm really uncomfortable about it, blah, blah. So they responded, and the cop kicked in our front door of our house, thinking that the people who had been called about,
I'm
ran
yelling
into
down the
structure.
stairs. They're yelling up the stairs. I'm like, what is going on?
Even though the house was horrible, we had a
They just
security
knew
system
that.
Yeah,
rigged
the
up.
alarm- I had put an
Lights and
alarm on
sirens
it.
are going off, and the cop's like, "Who's in here?" We're like, "I'm in here. I called you." And anyway, so
They told us we should make the house look more like somebody lives in it. And I'm like, our
We're
cars are in the driveway.
trying. So we had a whole plan that we were gonna fix up. Anyway, that's kind of beside the point. But so we spent about a year preparing to plant the church. And in the meantime, I just was driving around one day with the kids in the back seat on the way back from the beach. We were exhausted, and I just was driving around. And I would drive around the neighborhood just praying and going, okay, God, where could we be? There were all these ordinances about sound ordinances and all this stuff, like planting a church. You also couldn't plant a church north of Liberty Street because churches don't bring in revenue, so it needed to be a business if it was north
So
of
the
Liberty
city
Street.
Wow.
literally has zones. They won't allow
Red
churches
tape
in
and stuff.
because
Okay, because you could drive through Savannah and kind of clearly see that.
Yeah, they don't.
these-
So
They don't want them.
I don't know. I pulled up on Martin Luther King Jr. Boulevard, kind of between Oglethorpe and Broughton. And there was this warehouse it said, we've moved, and it was this furniture store that had moved. So I called that number. They gave me the realtor's number. I called the realtor. He told me how much it would cost to rent it every month. And I said, oh, wow, that I'm not even going to, I can't afford that. He said, well, how much can you afford? And I was like, oh, I don't want to offend you with how much I can
Right,
afford.
right.
He said, just tell me. And it was less than half of what he stated would
Right.
be required for rent. And he's like, I don't know. You never know. Let me call the owner and see if they'll take it. I was like, I do not want to offend him, but so that's on you if you call. He called me back 10 minutes later. I was like, okay, we're going to draw up a contract and you're going to have a lease. And so literally, like, we named our lease of what we could afford in this area that we couldn't afford.
That's awesome.
And we had bought a house what we couldn't afford in a neighborhood we couldn't afford. And I'm not saying that for like prosperity gospel. I'm
No,
saying
yeah.
like God provided for us,
Right.
and that was something that goes back to when Jim ended up here with Zoe. Just kind of like this assurance that he felt when everything felt like it was falling apart.
Right.
God was like, I will provide for you. And so we lasted on a 60-day revolving lease.
Yeah.
It lasted for 3 years, and we remodeled the place. And the
Wow.
reason it was a 60-day revolving lease is the landlords wanted to keep the option open if a higher paying renter came in, that we would agree to move out.
Right.
So after 3 years, now we built the church in that small little, this is how we did it. It was in the zone where we couldn't put a church, but
No. It was on the street corners. So, because when I went to the city,
noise ordinance.
when I went to the city, he goes, "You literally found the one area that we
Wow.
don't have a zoning restriction on." That's what he
Oh,
told
okay.
me in the
Wow.
office. He goes,
Okay.
"You found the one loophole," and I
And
was like,
we-
"I didn't find it."
right.
And we could have the noise, like with Savannah, you have businesses down below and then loft apartments up top. So we had a noise ordinance where on Sunday, because of worship, it'd be too loud. We couldn't be
Right.
in certain buildings. So we had no noise ordinance because it was the end cap beside a restaurant. So we could be there. But we put a coffee shop at the front of the building, and then the church was operating in the back of the building. And so we were there. We grew to 3 services, and we were like busting at the seams. We had
Yeah.
like over 60 SCAD students, Savannah College of Art and Design.
Right.
You know, it was right along that path. We were right next to Photo SCAD. By nature of being in the path of the students, we had like this booming college ministry. And then a couple of guys from New York came down after year 3, and they wanted the space to
A
put
bar.
a restaurant in, a bar.
Yeah. Right.
And so
I think they actually ended up being scammers. They ended up scamming the property owner out, but we lost our space.
Yeah, we
Right.
lost our space, and we moved over. We were busting at the seams so much that we decided to plant a suburban location for the people who were driving in so far
In
to
Pooler.
the downtown. So we planted Pooler, and the same Sunday that we launched Pooler ended up being the last Sunday that we were meeting in that space downtown by nature of how it all worked out. And then
Right.
after that, we split the coffee shop and the church. The coffee shop went over to be Blue Door on Bull Street, and then the church went over to the Savannah Theater. Is that right?
Yep.
Savannah
On Broughton, the
Historic
one on
Theater.
Broughton.
No, that's the
No.
SCAD
SCAD
Theater.
one?
The
Okay.
Savannah Theater is up off of one of the squares
Yeah, it's on one of the squares off
by
of
Fire Street Food.
Drayton. Yeah.
Yeah, off Drayton.
Okay.
So we ended up from there, and God opened the door, and a family blessed us with this property that we're in now, bought the building, and
We
renovated
operated
it.
for 1 year in the theater and in Pooler.
So you were doing 2 churches,
Uh-huh.
and I've heard you were
Yes.
driving from one location to the
Yeah.
other.
I so desperately like my heart is to be a good father to my kids, a good husband to my wife. I have my whole life heard pastors say, God first, family second, church third, and they are just dishonest. Their families are a total train wreck behind the scenes. And again, not everyone, but I've just seen so many. And I just, one of the things that I saw over and over and over is that the scripture says that an elder, a pastor, a leader should be a man of one wife, and his home should be in order. His children should be believers. And if they are not, you're disqualified. And the Church of America the pulpits are filled with pastors who are unfaithful to their wives, but even more importantly, their kids are running from God.
Right.
And I agree I accept that at some point your kids become adults and they
Right.
make decisions, and there's some exception there.
Right.
But if you've got a 14, 15-year-old child in your home that is running from the Lord, the disqualification, in my opinion, is not to shame you. It is to put your priorities in line, get your family in order. And this has been my priority, is raising my kids to know and love the Lord twice as much as I do. That's what Carmen and I set as a filter, as a vision for our home, that
Right.
our kids would know and love the Lord twice as much as we do.
Right.
And all along the way, what we have encountered is I would say marked success with that. Our children, they're not perfect, don't get me wrong.
Right.
But our children love the Lord. They are faithful in their walk with the Lord. Mine and Carmen's marriage is very healthy. We are faithful, have been faithful. There's never been unfaithfulness in our marriage. And along the way, the approach to that kind of round table has really been difficult.
Yeah.
And it is difficult because I realize now what I did not realize then is that those seats require shared vision.
Right.
And I think when we read the story of Camelot, what made the knights around the table is not that they were good or bad. And I think that's been some of my dilemma is that I equate, well, this person loves the Lord and this person is faithful to the Lord, so they can have a seat at the table. And that's just, there's more to it than that.
Right.
And there's a vision piece. And I really hope that over the next 15 years that we do a even better job at refining that vision, valuing family. I'm not interested in, and I don't feel a stir in my heart to try to mirror what other churches are doing. I think that if there is a style or even vision that somebody goes, this is what I'm looking for in a church, that's okay. I think that we'll be together for eternity, brothers and sisters in Christ. I'm really, I feel a real sense of pride in my own family. I feel like I'm gonna stand before the Lord and be able to say, God, I'm not perfect, but I really have done the things you've asked me to do in regards to the way I've raised my kids and the type of person I am. And I hope that can be kind of the backbone for the future.
Yeah.
That, I don't know, go ahead.
I mean, I would say at the point that we had the Pula location and then the location in the theater, we had also successfully started City Church Red, which is the outreach center.
And where does Ezra fall into that?
Ezra was born
Just before all that started.
just before we left the first Savannah location.
Yeah.
Okay.
On MLK. He was born, and then we moved over to the theater.
Okay.
And so Jim Pooler started with preaching, and Jim would preach. After preaching, they would do worship. While downtown, simultaneously, downtown started with worship.
Right.
Jim would finish preaching, come down. At the end of the worship, he would preach, and he would have someone go park his car, because by being downtown, you don't find parking
Right.
easily. So, and then I would get up and go to both locations with the kids, and they would have kind of like mirrored church. So in that sense, we had two locations doing the identical same thing. And we were really, in my memory, we were kind of bursting at the seams with growth. And it, a higher paying renter came in downtown and took the lease that we were doing at the theater. So we had to leave. And
we were, I mean, in fairness, we were struggling. Like, we had a lot of people attending, but a lot of students, they weren't giving.
Right,
the financial burden was very heavy on us.
consumerism, what I call consumerism in the church, like people were coming and attending and consuming, but like
Right.
the volunteer side was kind of suffering. But I would, like, the way that I remember it is Jim was going, I don't want to just get a location and do video teaching.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the reason is he's like, if someone's struggling with work or their grandma dies or whatever, they need a person there to talk to.
Right, right.
So he did not choose to do the model where he's going to preach and we're going to cast it, at whatever location. He's like, they need someone to walk up to and interact
Right,
with. So
right.
Well, and even more actually, and this is good because this kind of summarizes even more of what I was trying to get at, is that when again, if somebody wants to attend a video campus,
Yeah.
by all means, like I'm not here to condemn that. I find it interesting to talk about needing to hear from God and the Lord speaking, and then somehow separating that from the person who's instructing. And by what I mean by that, and what she's kind of alluding to, is that there are just moments where, yes, typically I'm 1 to 2 years laid out in what I'm teaching, I'm reading, I'm preparing, but I also know that I'll be in the middle of speaking and just the Holy Spirit will just prompt something that I'm not saying he can't do in a video. It becomes a little bit more complicated when we're piping out video to multiple sites that I am aware of something that somebody's walking through in the room in advance. You know what I'm saying?
And working at churches like that, it becomes very much flipping tables, not on purpose, but out of necessity. And so you really start pulling away that.
And can people be saved? Yeah. Do
Absolutely,
our lives
absolutely
changed? Absolutely. I want to be able to be in the room and really feel like, oh, I need to address this little issue. So again, I don't ever want to limit what the Holy Spirit can do because we know that, we believe that God is all-knowing, right? So he knows the future, right? He knows the end. But in the moment, right, that somebody's walking through something, the Holy Spirit is actively speaking.
So we were faced with, like, what do we do now? We're not in Savannah anymore by location. We really exhausted our resources looking for. We're just like, let's find an empty warehouse and redo it. And we just could not find anything. And so we met in Pooler for a year while we had City Church Red downtown. That's a whole nother miraculous story. We had this free space given to us to operate out of for a food bank that was open. And we tried like Sunday morning church there, Saturday church there. Like we did a few different things to reach that neighborhood. And then we had Blue Door, and we would operate our church offices out of Blue Door down on Bull Street. And then for a year we operated like that. And then someone who doesn't attend the church but was a client through Jim's business years ago came to us and was like, we believe we're supposed to make a way for you to be back downtown, if I'm saying that right.
In Savannah,
So God called them to provide. They have the gift of giving. And we found this location that we're at now and did the work. And
man, I was looking through our drive and I saw videos, and maybe we'll show you guys some, give Isaac something to do. But there's some videos of you guys walking through of what it used to look like, and it will blow your mind of what this place used to be.
Yeah.
Yes,
And
and that your hair was brown.
don't talk about that. Don't talk about the bad hairdo.
They're completely different layouts, completely different. You guys did so much work to get this place going.
And in the midst of that, I very clearly wanted to pastor here. This is what I wanted to do, and
so we raised so there's a pastor that was raised up over
raised up a
Pooler,
pastor,
and amazing family there.
And
is it still the same family?
It's the same family.
And our kids would go to like each other's
Pastor
birthday
Daniel
party.
Mosley
With Citizens Church was birthed out of
So
this.
we gave them full autonomy.
Right.
Like we equipped them. Our elders worked to help like kind of launch them up, and we kind of slowly transitioned further and further away. And and they've even rebranded and taken on their own identity. They're their own freestanding independent church.
Awesome
And
people out there. And then we came here. We operated for 1 week as a church. We bought this building from a church who had been here for 25 years. We opened, and then the city came and shut us down and said, "You're not a church, you're a grocery store." And it was because of one piece of paper that was missing on file for 25 years. So they shut us down. We had no occupancy. So we met in the parking lot every Sunday for 6 months from October to May. And it was the first time that it snowed in Savannah in 30 years. And our royal restroom toilet froze and busted. And but we still met. Like we got out the heat lamps. People would bring their camping chairs and blankets, and we had coffee. And it was like and I joke with Jim, I'm like, we should every year meet in the parking lot one Sunday on the coldest Sunday of the year.
Can we not do that, please? Not do that.
But it was like mobile church in our own parking lot. And it's like, turn an opportunity out. Wait, hold on. How do you say this? Turn the obstacle into an opportunity. It was very much like that.
Yeah.
Right.
And then, so now, we're here, and then we got fully going, and then COVID happened, and we got fully going. So it's like 2 steps forward, 1 step back, literally over the course.
A lot of perseverance over the year.
Yeah. So
I think it's funny, like hearing the story is like, there's this thread line through the whole thing, starting with Zoe, like of perseverance. And like you said, no matter what is thrown at us, no matter the good, the bad, the ugly, it's not going to change who we are, and it's not going to change our relationship with God. And, that's been 15 years of that on this end of, like you said, 2 steps forward, 1 step back, 2 steps forward, 1 step back. And there are very few churches that make it to 15 years as a church plant with no steps going backwards, much less, doing that for 15 years and obstacle after obstacle. So it's I think the celebration, the win of City Church of 15 years is like planning another church and all the things you guys have started and like the obstacles and maybe the hiccups here and the changes there, but like that it's still here and it's still going and, that lives are being changed and that's a cool, that's a cool story. That's not every church's story because normally when a church hits its first obstacle, the people pack it in and go back home.
Yeah. It's definitely it's definitely one of those things where I would tell Carmen, like, okay, if this happens again, I just don't know if I can. And then it'll happen again. She'll be like, you remember when you said if this happens? right. I'm like, all right, one more time. One more time.
One more time.
Well, and I think this would have to be for a whole new podcast, but I think that we should recount like the number of people who met at City Church got married.
Right.
It's very transient because we have students who come and go, and then we have military who come
Savannah's
and
a transient town.
Yeah.
And it's been really amazing to see the number of students who come. They meet either at school or at church, and they meet and get married. And Jim's done, like,
We
so
have
many weddings.
we have people in our church now who like came here individually, became best friends. Like we have little random stories like that.
Yeah.
So.
And we've got some families that have been in here since just the first, like the first month of the church. There's a handful of families that have been here. I'm not going to name because I don't want to forget any. But there are a handful that have been here the entire time.
Yeah.
And so,
which is also rare.
which is not just
Especially with all the moving and
Yes, we actually have a family in the church who his work moved him to Tennessee. Then he got a different job, moved to outside of Darien, Georgia, and they drive here every weekend. And it
Wow.
just that's they drive an hour,
Yeah,
and they act like
yeah,
it's no big
yeah.
deal. But every time
Right.
I think about it, I'm like, oh my gosh.
And like we're not a large church. I think that we have a big heart. I think that we have amazing people, and I say that to say like we've attended the church growth seminars and conferences and all the
Right.
things, and they have amazing quality content.
right.
And I don't know why, but it's just not who we are. And I don't know. Well, I guess what I'm trying to say is like we've listened to all the things, tried to do all the things, and from my summation of it, it is the human element. It's like this is amazing content, and this is the path to growth and success. But when you add in the human
Right.
element and you really get in and grapple with people in life,
Yeah.
and I don't have an answer for it, but what I'm trying to say is, like, we have attended and looked into all the church growth stuff, and it's like at the end of the day, here we stand and who we are, and
Well,
this is what we're doing.
I think too that's like why so many of them as soon as at the first sign of an obstacle, like just pack it up and go back home is because like you're taught in these models. There's a lot of good, but I think some of the negative is like that's just gonna work. Like
Right.
just do this and it's gonna work. Like wherever you are, whatever city it is, whatever if it rains or snows, like it's gonna work.
We were in doing a church growth thing and talking with a pastor and of a really big church, and somebody in our little discussion said, what do you do if, and they use the example like your drummer is in sin, right? And he was like, oh, it's very clear we do not tolerate that. We immediately remove the drummer, right? They've got to be set down. Okay, so what do you do on Sunday for drums? And he said, what do you mean? You just get one of your other drummers to play.
Right.
And it was apparent to me there was such a total insane disconnect that it's like, yes, you're right. We have a closet with drummers in it, and we'll just go
Who
open
are
it
all
up and get
amazing and can
and
play
they all
anywhere.
love the
Right,
Lord,
right,
and
right.
you know what I'm saying? They're just waiting, And
We got one drummer.
No, yeah.
He plays every Sunday.
yeah, there's no malice on their part, but there is a disconnect that it is a lot more complicated. You know what I'm saying? Because
Yeah.
then on the other side, they're like, well, you're not going to grow if you don't have a drummer.
Right,
It's like,
right.
okay, so
Well, and
what's the in
I
between?
want to take a minute to brag on Jim because where some people go into church planting, they take the loan from the thing and they use it for their salary. Like, we didn't do that. He started a company from the
Right.
ground up to fund our family so that we could do the church plant. So he was actually, the way that it worked.
We were doing a church growth thing and talking with a pastor and of a really big church, and somebody in our little discussion said, what do you do if, and they use the example, like your drummer is, in sin, right? And he was like, oh, it's very clear. We do not tolerate that. We immediately remove the drummer, right? They've got to be sat down. Okay, so what do you do on Sunday for drums? And he said, what do you mean? You just get one of your other drummers to play.
Right.
And it was apparent to me there was such a total insane disconnect that it's like, yes, you're right. We have a closet with drummers in it, and we'll just go
Who
open
are
it
all
up and get
amazing and can
and
play
they all
anywhere.
love the
Right,
Lord,
right,
and
right.
you know what I'm saying? They're just waiting, And
We got one drummer.
No, yeah.
He plays every Sunday.
yeah, there's no malice on their part, but there is a disconnect that it is a lot more complicated. You know what I'm saying? Because
Yeah.
then on the other side, they're like, well, you're not going to grow if you don't have a drummer.
Right,
It's like,
right.
okay, so
And
what's the in
I
between?
want to take a minute to brag on Jim because where some people go into church planting, they take the loan from the thing and they use it for their salary. Like, we didn't do that. He started a company from the
Right.
ground up to fund our family so that we could do the church plant. So he was actually, the way that it worked is we hired for our company, it was an audiovisual installation company, the people who worked Monday through Friday or Saturday for the company, they were the Sunday volunteer team. So they got paid through the company and then they served on staff, Sunday. And that
how we
worked for a
started.
while, really
Yeah.
beautifully. In fact,
Right.
Jim and Brenda, their
It's how we met them.
now son-in-law
Yeah.
was on staff with him with his
Okay,
company, and
cool.
they started coming to the church. Anyway, so
Lots of
it was
connections.
very like out of the box approach, and I don't know if anybody else has tried that or done that. I just know that that's something that we
Yeah,
did.
that's awesome.
So
That's awesome. Well, I think, like I said, I think just hearing it, like the perseverance and faith in what God told you guys to do, and staying steadfast with that through ups and downs and highlights and lowlights, that to remain faithful, that is special, and to have planted a church that's thriving out in Pooler, and to have people all throughout the country really who started here and moved on. It's an amazing thing. And so it's something we can't wait to see what the next 15 years hold, and what God is going to do, and belief in that, that system that you want to see. I feel the same way, like this concept of like that Knights table and people taking ownership and feeling a part of that is rare, and not a normal approach to ministry. So I think, God has you guys here for a reason,
Sure.
and this church has lasted for a reason. So it's going to be exciting to see what he does.
it's really important that people can operate in their strengths and lead, and that's really important for us to give freedom for people to do that.
Right. Right.
And to fill each other's gaps. So,
Right.
Yeah.
Well, thanks for joining us today, and I hope you took something from this and learned something, and can't wait to see you guys on a Sunday.